Welcome to the Bold Money Revolution podcast. This is your source for straight talking, no fluff, business and high performance conversations that add real depth and value to the way bold leaders live, work, and thrive. I'm your host, Tara Newman. I'm here to show you how to optimize your performance as a leader so that you can grow a business that is profit-rich, efficient, and allows you to generate real, tangible wealth for yourself and others. We are here to help you lead with your values, to perform without overwhelm and burnout, and to do your most important work in the world. Hey, everyone. I am here today with a veteran business owner and a dear friend of mine, Maggie Patterson. She is not only an agency owner, Scoop Industries. Scoop Studios. And she's also a mentor for service-based business owners. And Maggie and I often find ourselves ranting to each other about some of the things that we're seeing happen in the traditional online business space. And I think that Maggie and I both come from outside of that space. We have had long careers in corporate or private businesses that were decades in the making before we started running our businesses online. And we rant because we're concerned, right, Maggie? I would say I'm deeply alarmed.
Deeply alarmed, concerned, distressed some days.
Yeah.
It's a full range of not positive emotions. And then there's this little part of me that's like, why am I still here? And then I remember all the good things and all the wonderful clients I work for. And that's why I think you and I have a level of distress that we do.
Yeah. I know that's true. And I know that it's taken me a long time to find a group of women who are seeing the same things that I'm seeing at the level that I'm seeing them at. And so I really value when I can just come in to your Instagram and be like, Maggie, I'm crumbling.
What is happening?
What is happening? Because I think that you and I both have a similar mission in the sense that we're here to wake women business owners up and show them that it doesn't have to be the way they're seeing it, and trying to kind of be one part, let's get educated, and one part, let's, guide the path out from some of what we're seeing. So today I want to talk to you. I want to talk about some of the trends that we're seeing, because I think we are seeing a big shift in the traditional online business space. And I want to talk about some of the gaps that I see. I know you see some gaps in terms of like how businesses, I don't like to use the word should, but how businesses should be running versus how people are influencing businesses in this space. And I think just by having this conversation, naturally some solutions are going to fall out of it and be solutions focused. I do like to preface things and say that, like you, there's a lot of good that comes out of using the internet. When I say using the internet to leverage your business. So I don't actually personally distinguish between online business and non-online business. I think because then you start to think that one, it requires different tactics. And I think what you and I can come to agreement on is that businesses have been businesses for decades and centuries. And there are core foundational practices that every business uses. And there's nothing really new or earth-shattering here that's going to get you to where you want to go, although that's how it's marketed.
This is 100% true. So one of the conversations I've seen a lot about, and this is related to bro, I'll use air quotes, marketing, is a lot of people are being like, but bro marketing is so new and this and that. And I'm like, no, kids. Like, I say kids because I'm just like, sometimes I feel like everybody's mom or maybe grandma. I'm like, hi, can we just settle down for a minute here? Because, I started my career in marketing in 1998. And that was pre-internet. Like I used to fax out press releases, like as a, an intern. And the reality is all the tactics we use online are all based in traditional marketing. So when we look at online marketing or online business and we're like, oh, well, these tactics don't work. It's like, just go back to the tactics you would use in a corporate setting or somewhere else. The tactics haven't really changed. It's all the artifice around the tactics and how they have and if you know the history of scammers or people that do unethical things, like this is not new. It's just done in a way that's at scale. So we're much more aware of it and we're much more apt to be taking advantage of it. You know, a door-to-door salesperson back in 1920 trying to sell us a health elixir, we would have shut the door. With the internet, it's not as easy to shut the door. So we get sucked into things that we think we're too smart to get sucked into. And then we start to try to explain it away. And the reality is the tactics have not shifted that much. It's just the application of the tactics.
Yeah. So I think when you're talking about like that door-to-door salesman, what comes up for me is, so business has been around forever and grifters have been around forever.
Exactly.
Right? So period. However, what I think makes the online space so concerning is the algorithm creates a priming effect and recency where you're seeing these things first time, like the second you open your app, you're seeing them over and over and over again. So some of these hooks, you didn't like the door-to-door salesman didn't like harass you and follow you around everywhere you went.
Yeah.
Whereas now with targeting, with the algorithm, we're really, some might call it persistent, but it also has a brainwashing effect when you see something so many times and it wears you down, from seeing it so many times. So I do think in that sense, it's different. But one of the things that I notice about the online space is that they teach tools before process. And I think this is kind of what you were getting at. So, people will teach you, there's all these courses and programs for use social media, use email marketing, use a webinar, use, all these like ways that you can leverage. But those are tools and you have to understand why you're using them. None of them are per se bad. I enjoy using a lot of those myself, but I know when and where and why to use them instead of them becoming something that exhausts me and pulls my focus in a million different directions and distracts me. So, that's just one of the things that I've been noticing in terms of like a gap. But I want to back us up a little bit. Let's talk about some trends because I think things are shifting. What are you seeing?
So I think there's been a really interesting, I really had to think about when this goes back to, I really feel like the way things played out immediately after COVID lockdowns and everything else is we didn't see a slowdown in the trickery and treacherous tactics of online business. We saw a acceleration, an acceleration, put your PPP loan here and do all these things. And that for me made me say, I was in this kind of space of like, what am I doing? And am I going to continue in this industry? And I looked at that and I was like, oh, I am so needed more than ever. And I think what's happened is because of how swift and shocking that was for a lot of people, I think a lot of people woke up. And then, right after that, we had essentially racial reckoning where people realized a lot of the people they were following in this space were not committed to the same values as they were. So that has resulted in this acceleration of people wanting to do business with people that have values that are in alignment with them, people looking at certain tactics and realizing how rooted in systems of oppression and privilege, also just being like, this does not work for me on a fundamental level. So one of the big trends that's resulting in this is there's this conversation about how do we do business, I'll use air quotes, ethically. And, I feel like there's a great side of that where people are much, much more aware. And there's a downside to that where there's people taking advantage of it. So I feel like that's one of the biggest trends I see. And then I definitely see I don't know quite how to characterize this, but a definite awareness and willingness to push back on the tactics that I've never seen before. I mean, I've been talking about this stuff for a long time, and people are much, much more open to having those conversations. And honestly, a lot of those people I've had those conversations with, I've been surprised by. I never expected they would get there. So there is a shift happening, albeit slow and albeit complicated at times.
When I first came and brought my business online in 2014, well, also, I want to acknowledge your moment that you had last year during COVID where you're like, no, I'm needed more now than ever. That was a moment that I had as well because our first business went bankrupt during the 2009 Great Recession. And I learned a tremendous amount. I tell my clients all the time, I went bankrupt so you didn't have to. I learned so much during that time. And when COVID came, I'm like, wow, this is my time. This is my time to have a platform and to talk about these things. And I started to notice people coming out with their 10-step plan to recession-proof your business.
Oh,
and I was like, y'all need to sit down and let me have the stage now. I'm like, in diapers. I'm like, y'all need to sit down because it wasn't even a service-based business that we had. We were running a brick and mortar manufacturing business that, in today's 2021, monetize your passion online, which is a very cheap way to get a business up and running. I back then had, it was a multiple 6-figure startup that had like a lot of geopolitical implications because one of, what really started to do us in was our clients started shifting to sending their work overseas to China. Yeah. So we had to really understand global markets and it was very different. So I felt very like when COVID hit, I had been planning for a recession since 2018 because we had seen it. My dad and I would talk about it. My dad's a veteran business owner as well. And we were watching it kind of come and we were kind of planning for it, did not plan for a global pandemic. So I just really wanted to acknowledge that for you because that really ignited me as well. I remember when I first came and brought my business into the online space and feeling like nothing, I just fit nowhere. And I came into this really big Facebook group when big Facebook groups were a thing where you can spend like 6 figures and fill a Facebook group from ads for with 10,000 people. And the woman who was running this group was using psychological tactics to manipulate the people in the group. And as somebody with a deep psychology background, I was very, very uncomfortable in that environment. My intuition was screaming, this is a cult. And for the last 7 years, I've been waiting for everybody else to kind of realize the grift that's happening. And so what I'm seeing is I think Trump, the ultimate grifter, is highlighting what con artistry actually looks like in the world. And, there were a fair amount of people who did not vote for him. And even those in 2020, and I think even some that voted for him in 2020 are probably like, oops, that was a mistake at this point. And so I think that's a large part of the US demographic that's waking up to things like that. I agree with you with your points around COVID and racial reckoning and values. And I also think that a lot of people are starting to realize how in debt they've become.
Look at what's happened. So many people, like the thing they thought they could count on has not panned out the way they thought it would. Like when your partner loses a job or the market takes a dip or whatever it is, the expectation you have of financial security that a lot of people have, all of a sudden you start to realize like, hey, I can't be running my business with this non-existent profit margin. I can't be constantly investing in $50,000 masterminds that are really just glorified for business travel. Like, what am I actually doing? And what is the purpose of this business? And I think the interesting part of that is the consumer awareness piece. And that's really what I focus on with Small Business Boss is, what is the consumer education piece of this around what is a reasonable threshold of risk? What is the reasonable threshold of debt? When you have an online business, like we don't need to invest, like going back to your original business, like we don't need to invest multiple 6 figures to be successful. No. We're not running a manufacturing business. So why would we should be able to run very lean and very, our expenses should be very much in check. And there should be a profit margin pretty close to the beginning. So if we can't run our business in that way, perhaps we're over investing. And if you have to constantly be putting everything on a credit card for your business, like there's a conversation that has to happen. I know you're like you're into the money side of this, but I'm always like, if you can't pay for this out of your business bank account, like right now in full, like we need to talk.
Yeah. So I've been getting this year more than any other year. I've been seeing, and this is what's like leading me to believe that people are they're starting to wake up and get wise. I do want to say that there are some of these courses, programs that I actually think are appropriate at certain levels in starting a business. They're usually geared toward getting clients now, getting cash in the door. I don't always agree with the tactics that they teach, but I agree with the premise behind it. I think that there needs to be more clarity around who this is for and how this will help them and like why it works. Like I think there just needs to be more transparency, because I can transparently see how those work to a point. And then that makes it starts to become problematic when people want to start to scale. And so that's why I'm starting to see people who are incredibly exhausted, anxious. So Gallup has, you and I are into the research. Gallup has a recent study out that 60% of women small business owners suffer from daily worry. And that was a pre-COVID number. I purposefully am quoting the pre-COVID number, because we know that that's gone up.
Absolutely.
And 45% are experiencing daily stress. And that is disproportionate to male small business owners.
Well, I think what's really interesting that you just called out there is like the level of stress and worry, because we've all read those studies on women-led businesses, right? Like it's just a totally different thing. But then we are literally being sold solutions that are not customized, that are not tailored to our business model. And like what you said about like, let's say they get clients, and I end up with a lot of these people in my circles because there is very much a one size fits all that has zero understanding of different business models and how to acquire clients. So as someone who works with service business owners who are both what I would call, true B2B, selling to corporate, and then people who are selling more business to entrepreneur, because that is really truly a market that we never acknowledge, and that I am bound and determined we're going to make a thing. Keep talking about it. I see people who are learning a B2E, a business to entrepreneur tactic, and they're being told that will work for their corporate clients. And I'm like, your corporate client wants a proposal. And I've had many fights in public about proposals because of this. Like, good luck selling a $50,000 retainer or whatever it is if you don't have a proposal. They're not going to go to your website and read your packages. They're not reading your email newsletter. And the lack of understanding of those tactics, how they shift even within a service business model based on the market, based on the individual's needs, is massive. Another one, everyone likes to talk about, consulting or VIP days. That doesn't work for everyone. Not everyone can work with that speed and velocity and stress. So there's all these like prescriptive solutions, but there's not an understanding of how those work for each individual person in each individual situation. And that lack of specificity is killing people's businesses and keeping them just struggling when they don't need to be.
Can we talk about, because I know you and I work. I saw on your website, you're like, I work with clients every day.
Yep.
Me too.
What a concept.
I know. So, because, I think that this is also a trend that I am seeing, a shift where people are realizing that even if they have created a membership, even if they've created a course that gets you to a point, but people actually want people to help them.
Yeah, people really do want people to help them.
And people will pay to be actually helped, because the world has gone mad and turned everything into an info product.
Yes. And not everyone, like, let's even just break this down to the most basic level. Not everyone's learning style is compatible with an info product. Like, I'm the perfect example. Like,
Me
I
too.
can do all the info products, but like, am I going to watch your video? Probably not. Like the last thing I took, the only reason I completed it is because there was transcripts. But the entire info model is based on a very narrow approach. And I agree. Like people pay people like us because they want help. They want customization. They want specificity. They don't want this cookie cutter, one size fits all advice. And then, the flip side of this is when you're working with clients consistently, you're seeing the trends, you're seeing the patterns, you're seeing what's happening in real time. So, through a situation like navigating the ups and downs of COVID, we're able to look across the data points of our clients and provide our clients with actually a real world perspective. One of the things I see a lot of is I get people, or I am watching people who are learning about running a service business from people who haven't actually done services in the last 3 to 5 years. They worked with clients for a hot minute, and now they don't do that. Or, like if I'm going to teach you to run an agency, I actually run an agency. So I can tell you what's happening right now running an agency. It's all very meta, but this annoys the hell out of me.
Yeah, I know you get on that. I get on that like more too, like what you were just talking about around info products, because, my background's in instructional design and learning and development and adult learning theory. And like, it really hacks me off to watch course creators, it hacks me off to watch influencers teach people how to design curriculum or courses when they have no background in instructional design, because they're not actually creating something typically that's particularly outcome oriented. It's, oh, you just know this thing, so just put it into a package and slap a price on it and go run some ads, which I think actually brings me to when I originally reached out to you. I said, can we have a conversation about the lack of innovation in the service-based business industry, because, and in the traditional online business industry, because it's crushing. I don't care that the market is saturated at all, personally.
No,
I really don't. But if you're not going to be innovative, you're not going to stand a chance. And when you take these programs that are mass delivered to hundreds and hundreds of people, and you're being taught the same process, way of doing things, that's hundreds and hundreds of people who are now going out and doing the same thing. There's no innovation there.
Yeah, the lack of innovation. So I co-host a podcast with Michelle Mazur, who I know you're also friends with.
Yes, you do.
Called Duped. And we just talked about this in our most recent episode, where we're wrapping up our season 1, where we're talking about, one of the biggest costs of online business as it is done today is there is no innovation. And that lack of innovation is leading to so much sameness. So all the messaging sounds the same. Like people literally rely on these tired tropes and then wonder why they can't sell anything. And you're right, the market is saturated. So if everyone's saying, I did it and you can too, or look at my 6-figure lifestyle, like those messages so quickly become meaningless. And how are you ever going to stand out? I know for me, my solution to this is like, now what can I do that does not scale? And what can I do that is highly customized? And,
me too.
And how am I going to say something different? Like I literally just paid Michelle as a messaging expert to help me work through some of these things, because I don't want to lose my edge. And I know that things I said 5 years ago that no one was saying, I now can Google that and find 100 results for it. And I'm not saying like I'm the originator of that concept, but we have to push ourselves to keep our edge, to stay ahead of the trends, to watch like, okay, this is interesting. Now, lots of people are saying this. What am I going to say that's different? What is my approach? What is my unique perspective on this? Because it's really easy to copy someone, which we see a ton of. Plagiarism is rampant in this industry. And I'm not talking about like take a swipe file. I'm talking about like actual ideas being lifted and passed off as someone else's work. And that it is crushing us in so many ways.
Yeah. And I don't think that, I think that we're at the point where some of these mills, that are pumping out, business knowledge, education, I don't even know. whatever to call it, to be honest. I always say you have to look at the origins of the person who you're being mentored by, and you have to trace their lineage, so to speak, back and see where they have learned from, because that's what you're perpetuating in lots of different ways. And I think it's important to understand that, and not to say you should or shouldn't learn from someone because of that, but to understand where they're coming from, what their approach is, because I think a lot of people are very trusting that are taking some of these programs, and they're not realizing how they're perpetuating a cycle that they don't understand.
This is 100% true. Like, I wrote this entire thing last fall and did a podcast episode on it. It's, talking about that family tree. And I feel like one of the things I would really like to see is, for those of us that have been in the industry for a while, like, why aren't we disclosing who we learned from? Why aren't we like, that information should be readily available so people understand what they are getting into. I look at some people who are, slowly trying to step aside from some of these things. And I'm like, okay, that's great. You're like trying to distance yourself from these people. But at the same time, I want you to name your teachers, and I want you to repair the harm you've done as a result of that association, because you've built a multi-million-dollar business on it.
Yeah, well, so it's really interesting that you bring that up. During the 2020 election cycle, also, you're Canadian, just forgot as we're talking about Trump that you're Canadian.
Oh, I can talk about
you're our neighbor upstairs, so I'm sure you follow it. But when during this election cycle, and when he started in with there's fraud, and this was people start talking about the big lie. And there was a Yale professor on Twitter who unpacked what the big lie is. And I took it, and I have it in a Google Doc, and I have it side by side laid out next to the online business industry and how they perpetuate the big lie. And honestly, I haven't done a podcast episode on it yet, because I just haven't had the courage and the fortitude to really go there. But I'll start talking about it a little bit now, because you brought it up. So you brought up something that's a part of this big lie. So the big lie is a propaganda technique used by Nazis. It gains traction, and one of the components of the big lie is that there are people who uphold the lie. So yes. You see now Congress in the US is upholding the lie, and you see Liz Cheney, who just came out and was de-leadershiped, because she said, I'm not going to continue to perpetuate this lie. And we see this a lot in the online business industry when we have these people, these prodigies, or so to speak, that, I got this big result. I built this $1 million business off of learning from this person.
Yep.
That's this proof, but it's atypical.
And the atypical, I literally should just probably get a t-shirt that says like results not typical, because this is part of inventing authority in this space, from the bullshit income claims right through to this results not typical social proof. Like, these people perpetuate these cycles by continuously taking the one student who's had amazing results with zero disclosure of what did they spend their way to that? Probably. And then that becomes the poster child, their wonderkin, that will then go on and be, create more wonderkins. And I call this the circles of indoctrination. And I can say this to you because remember that shampoo commercial back in the 70s or the 80s was they told two friends and they told two friends. That's what happens, right? Coach one teaches these three people teach 9 people. And then it's this exponential thing. And we don't necessarily know the origin of the idea, but the lie is perpetuated. That this is the way the lie is, that this is the way business is done. It's that you must use these types of stories. You must use these type of sales tactics. And we don't stop to question it because that person got the result that has been marketed to us as the most desirable outcome. We need a 7-figure or 6-figure or whatever type of business is, 8-figure, the one that's whatever is most in vogue at that time.
Yeah, I watched this happen back in like 2014, I was in this big group, and the woman who was running the group just was a very gifted sociopath. And I don't mean to diagnose her. I don't mean to diagnose, but like she genuinely, I actually booked a call with her. I paid a lot of money. She was charging a shit ton of money for like a 1-hour call. And I booked the call with her because I'm like, I need to understand like how she is doing this. Like I didn't book the call because I wanted to learn from her. I booked the call because I knew she was very suspect. And she, of course, proved herself to be incredibly suspect on this call. And then things started coming out. But anyway, so she's this gifted sociopath who gets all these people buying from her. And then she gets too full and she says, oh, but so-and-so is my protege.
Yep.
They learned everything from me. So go book in with this person. And everybody flocked to book in with this person. And it was very interesting to see. So first of all, that was credibility. She tapped this person as credibility. This person was very big into pay to play. So she had paid for all these things, like paid to write a chapter in a book, paid to get into like these top business coach things, paid to get on certain platforms and have certain visibility. And so she looked a lot more credible than she was. And that's how results atypical happen.
Yeah. And I mean, this is everything from having the money to dump into a photo shoot to being able to buy the chapter in the book to being able to buy your way into the right room to press logos that are totally made up. Hello, have you all got the message about Yahoo? Because they want to put you in the top 10 coaches, service providers, like all of these things that are used. It's all the trappings of authority when it's those people are essentially, and this is the way to think of them, they're business influencers. Mm-hmm. They're not actual business running a business. They're running the image of a business to sell you that image so that you want that. And then you try to buy that image. And I saw a meme not that long ago. It was like, do you want that person's business and life, or do you want the actual business? Like, are you buying the lifestyle? And the lifestyle is a big part of this. Like, and for some people, that lifestyle is jet set. And some people, it's like, hey, I work an hour a day. But I mean, we're all being marketed to in a way that is, it's not based on reality.
So I think you and I, so what I say, and I think you'll agree with me here, is that Maggie and I want to teach you how to have influence over yourself, not be influenced by some of what you're seeing. And we want to teach you to be influential in your circles, but not an influencer in terms of like you're monetizing your identity. And so, you know, some of the things I've done a lot to like kind of unfuck my business from anything that I might have picked up inadvertently or tried and tested over time, you know, and I don't do a lot of any kind of here's my lifestyle because first of all, I'm boring as hell. And I'm like, what do you do with your money? I'm like, I invested in stocks and put it in a savings account and like add value to my home. Like, I don't know. I'm just not an asshole with my money. So it's super boring. And I don't want you to do the things that I do with my money. I want you to do the things that you want to do with your money. That's what I want. I don't want you to have my lifestyle. I want you to have the lifestyle that you want, as boring or not boring as you want it to be. It was like really a gift when I decided to not show a ton of my lifestyle anymore because it felt like so much pressure to be like, wow, I'm just really boring.
And, you know, Michelle and I did an episode on this and it came down to like, are you an influencer or an expert? And one of the big distinctions is, are you selling an image or are you selling your ideas?
Yeah.
I want to be known for my ideas, not for my image, because if we're relying on image, like I got some work to do. Like, I don't want to have to get hair extensions and worry about like my face is like appears periodically in things, but like, do I want my entire business to be built on these superficial measures of success? No. And plus, like you said, my life is super boring. It'd be like, here I am making dinner again, doing mom stuff. Like,
and the other thing too is like, I'm going to bring up Rachel Hollis, and I like don't mean to stir up a whole pot of shit, but like last year, she like around the COVID times, like she decided that her and Dave were going to split up. And I know a lot of people who follow her felt very duped that she was always portraying this perfect marriage, and, you know, they had the together rise or whatever the heck they do. And I just genuinely felt bad for them as a couple going through something really hard like divorce and having to do it publicly. I mean, I get that they created that, but nobody's perfect.
No. And I think
I'm not perfect.
yeah.
I don't want to present that to people because I experience really hard things in my life. We all have life struggles and crisis and all those things. And I just really rather be a stand for being human than being hashtag relationship goals or anything like that.
Well, plus too, I mean, you and I both know, like, you're married long enough, and like hashtag relationship goals sometimes is not super exciting. And I don't want to play out my life in the public eye. Like, that's not why I started a business. I wasn't like, hey, I want to be business famous. I don't want to be like, I just want to do good work, put good things into the world, have the opportunity to create and, you know, serve the people I work with. And if that requires me to show up to be relationship goals, I'm going to reassess.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, this other thing that I saw people doing in terms of innovation that's really perplexing to me and concerning, because I'm seeing it happen more and more, and they don't realize they're doing it. So I want to highlight it, because also with innovation comes a couple of other factors, comes critical thinking,
Yes.
decision-making, and problem solving. All things that we're becoming void of as we consume info products, as we consume reams of content that takes us nowhere, right? Like, I even think like Steve Jobs would probably roll over in his grave if he realizes how he contributed to like this lack of innovation and lack of critical thinking. Like, you can power this very powerful technological device with zero critical thinking skills.
Yep.
And so I blame him also, just to be clear. But I'm watching women like us, because what you said really resonated, right? Like, you want to do good work, you want to do meaningful work, you want to work with people, you're high touch. So many people that I work with are like that. And then they try to take this high touch, depth type work that they do and turn it into an 8-week program or an info product or a course, and they're miserable. And they're like, but everybody says I should be able to do it this way. But that's not how depth work works.
It is not how depth works. And I think, going back to one of the lies or tropes or, kind of things we're being sold is the idea that we should have this scalable offer, whether that's a course or membership or something else. And it is seen as like we're never going to get past a certain level unless we do that. And I did it. I was miserable. I hated it. It was awful. It was not how I want to send my energy. And guess what? I suffered, and the people in that, like, yes, they had a great experience. And I'm sure they're not sitting around going like, oh my God, Maggie, what did you do? But like,
yeah,
I don't feel like they got my best because that's not how I show up. So I think, in terms of the lack of innovation, all of us kind of saying, okay, wait, that's not actually how I want to work, thinking really critically and making decisions for ourselves that are going to buck the status quo, because so much of the intricacies of this lie now comes down to you can have the same results and everything else, but you can just do it in this way. And I think we have to be like, that doesn't work for me. A great example is I had someone who told me, they're like, I don't have my price on my sales page because this is what my coach told me and everything else. And she says, I have always felt wrong about this. And I just said, if you feel it's wrong, why are you listening to that person? And she really thought about it, and she's like, oh my God, like, what am I even doing? And it's just because that was the way that type of offer should be sold according to some arbitrary rule. And I think the more we follow an arbitrary rule, we dictate by the status quo, the loss of innovation is fast and swift, and it's doing us all a disservice as consumers, as business owners. Like, we're not we're not advancing if we're not willing to challenge the existing structures of what's there.
That's because now we're touching on my pet peeve, I'm going to roll this out. So I'm going to give you my pet peeve real quick. I have had somebody that they must go through the same program because they came to me and said the same thing. We're not teaching sales skills. We're not teaching women how to sell. And if you, and so that's really why I'm passionate about teaching sales skills, because if every woman just knew how to sell from a place of empathy, from a place of being a genuine human being and a caring individual, women would not be struggling to make money ever. And they could take those sales skills and use them in their business, go back to work for somebody else and use them in somebody else's business. It is a life skill that women need to have. But it's like, I can barely even talk about the solution being sales skills because everybody wants the fucking Ferrari version, like they click to buy, they click on a link and buy, they, DM me on Instagram and I make $3 million in a day. And it's just so aggravating and frustrating.
But I'm glad you brought up the sales skills piece, because I think people are so scared of selling, or they have these ideas around selling. So then these things become much easier. So then what happens is there's this constant push in all these systems, whether it be selling from a webinar or in the DMs or whatever. It's like, how can we consistently avoid actual selling and put ourselves one step further removed? And what I always challenge my clients on is like, from my perspective, it's an act of respect and humanity for us to show up in the sales process and engage with people. I don't buy things if I can't talk to people in it, like, unless it's like a $297 Instagram course, but like, if I can't actually talk to you ever, I'm not buying that from you, because I need that one-to-one connection. I want to be respected. I want to be treated with fairness and dignity. And so many of these ways of, Ferrari selling, if you will, they're designed to strip out the humanity and make it into a transaction, not a relationship.
Well, so this is how the online marketing space preys on women. They know they're uncomfortable selling and it makes them nervous. They know that they don't understand their value and how to have a difficult conversation around like boundaries and things like that. So the pitch is, hey, don't worry about owning your value or understanding your value. You can sell your thing for $59. By the way, you need to sell 4,011 of those every month to be able to put food on the table for your family at $59. And women,
and by the way, you have 12 people on your email list.
Right. And women, but that's not really, but they see, right? They're seeing, and so they're seeing it happen. They think they're seeing it happen. And so women go, I can work hard, because women are the hardest workers. Yep. And not only are women the hardest workers, they are the hardest workers for unpaid work. This is what women have been conditioned to do their entire lives, is to raise their hands and take on more for less.
Yeah. And so this perpetuates it.
This fits that cycle. And so women go, the ambitious women, the high achievers go, hold my beer, no problem. And then they realize they don't even have enough money to buy the beer, right? Like, and this gets perpetuated over and over again by these archetypes in the online space. And they think because it's a woman that she's just like me, but she has learned from all the men.
And this right here is why I created something called the celebrity archetypes, because entrepreneur archetypes, because so many of my clients would say, oh, well, they don't look like or act like that. And I'm like, it's just a different archetype. Mm-hmm. You're no longer dealing with someone selling you the luxury lifestyle. You're now dealing with the best friend next door. You're now dealing with a rebel creative. And these things are very insidious, and they all pull on different things. So the BFF next door is focusing on that relatability. Like, I've got the messy bun, and like, I'm literally your friend, and I will, teach you. There's all these different ways of doing it. And we need to become much more adept at recognizing the archetypes, but just like the tactics in the totality. Like, if people are using these tactics, they are not for you. They are coming out of that ecosystem, because a bro isn't always a bro. Sometimes they're a babe. Sometimes they're a non-binary person. It doesn't matter the gender or the package. It's about the tactics.
Yeah. The patriarchy is genderless.
Yes. And I think one thing you mentioned about women being scared of sales, I also feel like the other part of this is working with clients has been villainized as a result, because a lot of people struggle with the boundaries. They struggle with the conversations. They struggle with the interpersonal relationships. And what tends to happen is, this is the other reason they get sold the dream. Like, running a client service-based business is actually the fastest way to make money.
And most profitable.
It is the most profitable. As someone who runs 2 service-based businesses and has for years, I can attest to that. But the reality is, we're told that clients are going to burn us out. Dealing with clients is hard. Client or boundary issues. And then what happens is this avoidance of working with clients, the same way we avoid sales. And then we are now trying to sell a course. We probably have no business selling. We've created something based on no experience, no frameworks, no nothing, because that's, again, another avoidance technique. And these marketers, these people selling us these solutions, they know what we're fearful of.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And it's so funny because everybody thinks like they're being sold on the fear of missing out. They're not. They are being sold on something so much deeper.
Yeah. Fear of missing out is like 1% of all of it. And I've got like this running list. Like, let's talk about all the mindset manipulation tactics. Let's talk about how we use all these cult tactics about limiting access to leader. Like, everything you said about cults true. If you run through what's I'm sure you've heard of this, the BITE model, Stephen Hassan, who's a cult expert. Like, if you run through the BITE, the behavior, what is I? Can't remember off the top of my head. Thought and emotion, like, you run those through those sections on the website, you will easily see the tactics of online business. You're like, check, 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 check. The second I started doing that last summer, I had goosebumps and I was like, oh my goodness, this is an actual thing. These people use the exact same tactics in order to control us.
Yeah, it's true. that's what I'm going to say. It's true. It's Maggie speaking the truth, but I'm going to be respectful of everybody's time, and I'm going to roll us out of here. Maggie, like, final thought, tip, help for people. I mean, what can they do if they're like, wow, like.
So I think the one thing I don't want to do is leave everyone with a sense of fear, a sense of dread about all of this. There is a lot of good happening in the online business world. And I think the easiest distinction that you can make is, as a consumer and looking at tactics in your business, am I leading from a place of fear where I am playing on people's deepest insecurities, or am I leading with trust? Am I focusing on respect and transparency and truth and doing things in my full integrity? Or am I trying to game the system to get ahead? And I think if you can carefully look at those things, and also critical thinking and trusting your gut, never underestimate the power of those things, because they will force you to slow down and make better decisions, whether that be a purchasing decision or a decision you have to make in your own business.
Yeah. So, I'm really big on having people just be better consumers.
Yes.
And, just do your research, vet people. Oftentimes the most qualified people don't have the shiniest marketing. That's usually a hallmark to a really good, incredible expert at times. The other thing that I will say is to add to what Maggie said about trusting your gut. When I went and studied a whole bunch of cult things, the one thing that I realized was there was always this moment where it didn't feel good. It didn't feel right. Their gut, their intuition, something was trying to speak to them. It felt weird. They were like, why is this person asking me to do this thing? Why are we doing this weird dance party? Why are we wearing...
What do I have the sashes?
The sashes from Nexium.
Yeah, exactly.
Why are we wearing these sashes? And so it was like a fork in the road. It was almost a decision tree based on their intuition. And the ones who were like, no, I'm out, got out of the cult. And the ones who overrode their intuition always wind up deeper into the cult. So, I just want to drive that point that Maggie said home. I also want to drive the point home that, we're not trying to be fear mongers here. Maggie and I are very much realists, and we are both benefiting from using the internet to grow our businesses. We enjoy that. And we really are here just to have a different conversation. And to, Maggie's big on no BS. I'm big on no BS. One of my core values is transparency. That's why I like having these conversations. So that's really where I want to leave everybody. I also want everybody to go. Maggie's got 2 podcasts.
I do. So I have Duped, which you can find at dupe.online. And that's all the places that all podcasts are. And I also have the BS Free Service Business show. And all the conversations Tara and I had today. Like, I've got episodes on cults. I got episodes on income claims. All of this, everything we talked about, I've probably got an episode on that at this point.
Yeah, and they're great podcasts. And so I really want you to go and check Maggie out, because I think you'll learn a lot from her if you're starting to wake up and kind of question how things are being done. And I don't want you to freak out and be like, I don't want to be like them, right? I hear that so much. Like, I don't want to be like them. I want you to know that you can do it your way. And Maggie and I are here to show you how to do that.
And if anything, get excited about the fact there is another way and there's another path and there's an opportunity for you to do things with integrity and value and everything else, versus feeling like you have to kind of jam yourself into these things that just don't feel quite right.
Yeah, have the courage to lead with what you want to see in the world. Thanks for coming by, Maggie.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Always so much fun to chat about this stuff. If you found this podcast valuable, help us develop more bold leaders in the world by sharing this episode with your friends, colleagues, and other bold leaders. Also, if you haven't done so already, please leave a review. I consider reviews like podcast currency, and it's the one thing you can do to help us out here at the Bold Leadership Revolution HQ. We would be so grateful for it. Special thanks goes to Stacey Harris from Uncommonly More, who is the producer and editor of this podcast. Go check them out for all your digital marketing and content creation needs. Be sure to tune into the next episode to help you embrace your ambition and leave the grind behind.